It's going to be really difficult to keep this video YouTube safe, but in the wake of what happened in Minneapolis, Trump is attempting to ban certain tools from certain individuals. Let's look into it. First, to set the stage, let's read from what CNN has to say about this specific incident and what Trump is doing in response. In the wake of what happened in the Minneapolis Catholic Church, senior Justice Department officials are weighing proposals to limit those who might transform people's rights to possess pew-pews, according to officials with familiar internal discussions. The talks, described as preliminary in nature, appear to build on the idea that has gained currency among conservative media since the Minneapolis school issue. That we know what happened in the Annunciation Catholic Church. The police say that was carried out by a 23-year-old person of a certain mental health issue. Such a move would represent a dramatic escalation from the Trump administration's fight against the rights of those specific mentally unwell Americans. President Trump has issued a series of executive orders on the topic, including one barring those certain folks from serving in the military and another federal prison guideline, making sure that they go into the certain prison of their birth identity.
I am shocked. Well, not that
My name
shocked.
is Casey, and I have been a therapist for over 13 years, and I have personally worked with individuals who have had their Second Amendment rights taken away from them for the status of their mental unrest. And that is actually not even that difficult to do in states like the one where I live in the Midwest. And so what is it that would prevent a federal administration from doing the same thing to a certain mental disorder? Truthfully, it's probably well within the scope of what we should be looking into, that people who are on and taking certain medications should be considered as possibly being subject to these types of Second Amendment limitations, because RFK came out immediately following the Minneapolis incident and said, we have been able to link several of these mass events to individuals who were taking SSRIs, for instance, or other mental health medications. So is it reasonable that if you are going to approach a doctor, get on a medication because you are mentally unwell, that you would be considered at least subject to some analysis as to whether your Second Amendment rights should be upheld? Well, it may not be the favorite of the NRA or other institutions like that who've spoken out against the Trump proposed ban, but it may still be within what is best for society if some individuals who are already considered, mentally unwell and have been admitted as such by taking these medications that they're being prescribed, could their Second Amendment rights be limited under a government who's trying to do what's best for their citizenry?
Stop it. Get some help. McDonald's.
For those of us who might be freaking out and saying that, it's a slippery slope and any amendments to our Second Amendment rights might be something that could lead to, when a Democrat comes into power, eventually other people having their Second Amendment rights taken away. If you're identified as MAGA, you no longer get your Second Amendment rights. Well, let's look into what exactly already provides limitations, just to remind everyone that this isn't exactly a precedent that's never been set before. So in the state of Ohio, if you've been convicted of a felony, violent or drug related, you're disqualified from your 2A rights, or on appeal, you can win some of them back. If you have an indictment pending, under indictment for drug or felony violent crimes, if you're a fugitive from justice, obviously, if you are drug or alcohol related issues have been documented in the public, so chronic alcoholism, drug dependency, or things like that, you are disqualified, especially if it takes on legal precedent. But when you make the application, you are supposed to say that you're not under the influence of any certain substances. Could that possibly mean that SSRIs could fall under that jurisdiction of the law, or that application of the law? If you have adjudicated mentally, so the next category of people who are disqualified are mental health concerns. So if you have an adjudicated mentally incompetent court-ordered mental illness or an involuntary commitment. Now, there are probably time constraints on that, but if you have been committed and you meet criteria for these other severe and persistent mental illnesses, and those have ever been adjudicated, like if your family needed to take over your legal precedent for how you make decisions about your mental health. If your family took that over, you would obviously be disqualified. If you have a domestic violence order, then you're disqualified. If you have misdemeanor crimes of domestic violence, those may or may not disqualify, but it's under consideration. And if court petitions and they are able to sort of hash it out in court, you can also have your Second Amendment rights limited. Therefore, it is not unprecedented that we might be able to sort of infringe on the Second Amendment in some certain cases, because obviously we do not just simply let everyone in society run around with mass firearms. Now, what might be a good possibility to begin with is that the reclassification of certain mental illnesses as, well, in this case, the mental unrest of those individuals in society who are attempting to be a transformer from one type to another, that might actually need to be classified as a severe and persistent mental illness, which of course is going to be an uphill battle against all these mental health practitioners that write these DSM guidelines. And while it's been super celebrated in the last 5 years, that reclassification may actually lead to some ability to begin to infringe on what does it mean to have a society that's stable, allowing these individuals to try to get better from what's going on with them, and allowing the society writ large to be safe from the incursion of people who might be taking severe medications. Very minimally, let's say they were all fine and dandy otherwise. Being on these severe medications can make a difference in your self-harm risk, your harm to others risk, and your ability to make impulse control decisions when your serotonin levels and other levels of neurochemicals are just firing off in your brain. My experience as a mental health counselor is that these medications have been advertised to the public as being a solve for a chemical imbalance, which has essentially been disproven. There might be a correlation between serotonin and depression, but causal is sort of been refuted by scientific journals over the last 5 years, even longer than that. So we've already known that this isn't an exact cure, but when you get on these medications, it causes your neurochemicals to while out. And when we have such little understanding about the true nature of these mental illnesses, what we're unwilling to admit is that it probably has more to do with lifestyle than it does to do with a chemical imbalance. And so, is it reasonable? Yes. Should we necessarily take Second Amendment rights away from people? Maybe not. But is it worth hashing out in the public right now because of what's been transpiring? Absolutely, yes, it is. Thank you for watching. My view of this as a mental health practitioner over the last 13 years has certainly developed, and after conversation that I've had within my field and even within my church and other experts, I am still deeply hurt that we have allowed, as mental health providers, this ideology to capture our industry. And it's provided me great mental consternation that this ideology has essentially forced me into a pigeonhole where I will not lie to my clients, but I will also not press forward whatever the board says is the newest thing just because they believe what's true is based on this world order that we just can't escape, especially in my industry. If you found this helpful at all, please like, share, and subscribe. Let's consider whether certain medications or mental illnesses are things that we're willing to make a prerequisite for 2A instantiation in the lives of individuals. Have a great one. I'll talk to you soon.